Hello everybody, welcome back to a brand new video, and I got the inspiration to this video from a quote from Colorado, from a congressional candidate from Colorado, Adam Frisch, who said the Democrats have abandoned rural America. And I thought, what if the Democrats have just decide randomly, for some reason, to listen to this guy, and, start trying to appeal a bit more to rural America, at least just 5%, not too much, of course. You still have to focus on suburbs and minorities, as well as working class above the rural areas. If you're a Democrat, and for you're a Republican, the rural areas are very much, up on your list of we need to get these guys out to vote right now. But let's say let's say Democrats decided, okay, let's try, dip our toes in the water for a, victory lap in the rural areas. Because if Democrats start making rural areas competitive, right now, they will be unstoppable. I'm just saying that for a matter of fact. Republicans, they would be unstoppable if, they started doing better with minorities, with blacks, Hispanics, Asians, so on and so forth. So both parties have their keys to becoming unstoppable. With Republicans, it's minorities, and with the Democrats, it's rural America. And if you want, I can do one with Republicans and minorities, but I'm just going to do a video right now for Democrats in rural areas. How would Democrats do if they put some effort into rural America? We have to be realistic about this. It's not going to be a snap. It's they're automatically, in the 30s or 40, in the mid to high 30s in rural areas. That's not going to happen overnight. If anything, if they start targeting rural America now, we might be seeing competitive rural America in the 2030s, 2040s, and that will be a big problem for Republicans as they become region locked and obsolete. So if they started targeting rural America, Washington, Oregon, California, they stay safe as always. Nevada, of course, you're targeting a lot of rural land outside of Reno and Clark County. Um, I'm gonna say this would stay tilt. Of course, Republicans are doing better with Hispanics, and so if you're putting time with the rural areas of Nevada, that means you're kind of giving up time to spend time in Clark County and Washoe County. So I'm saying tilt D, regardless, as my current prediction. Arizona, that's a big gain right there, especially with Native Americans who live in the rural area. That might push you up to lean Democrat in Arizona if you start targeting those Native American rural voters, which there are so many in Arizona that Democrats could play with. Hawaii, that's safe. Alaska would be competitive. It would be likely Republican around the 7 to 8 point range right there. Again, Democrats are already targeting rural Alaska because of how trends are in the state, being the polar opposite of continental U.S. Utah, that will still be safe Republican, though it'd probably be under 15. Idaho, Wyoming, those stay safe, probably in the high 20s, low 30s. Montana would be competitive. Again, there's a lot of room to grow. Montana's rural areas are not maxed out, surprisingly. So, and of course, Montana is a state that is trending to the left, albeit slowly. So you might see the state go 8 points to the Republicans if you decided to, for some reason, target the rural areas. Colorado, New Mexico, both safe. Again, it's kind of a tricky situation there. New Mexico was already on the brink of being safe in 2024. So if you were just pushing rural voters to vote Democrat, you might as well just say it's safe Democrat. Again, North Dakota, South Dakota, all of Nebraska goes safe except the second district. There's not really much change here. You'll do better in the third district, but you need the first district in order to win Nebraska. Kansas, that will be competitive. I'm already saying it's going to be competitive. I'm going to say lean Republican. A lot of college educated whites in the state. Now add on to the rural voters that you're getting, which is like a 5% boost to your column, which does wonders. Surprisingly, you probably have a 3 to 4 point competitive Kansas on your hands. Oklahoma, you do well in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa. You're going to be making Trump and Republicans sweat like you did Stitt this year. Still safe no matter what. Texas, this one's a big boy prize for rural voters. Again, this goes into the competitive lean R column, close to tilt because there's so much room for growth with rural voters in Texas, and Republicans are maxed out in rural Texas, and they're now just relying on Hispanics to trend to the right to keep Texas and do Republican columns for the rest of time. Minnesota, that will go safe Democrat. Again, a lot of rural voters in the Iron Range and western Pennsylvania and southern western Minnesota, as well as in southern Minnesota that are easily swing voters that tend to vote Republican. Those could easily come out and turn for Democrats if you have the right messaging. You probably have to moderate your stances on abortion. Probably not so much gay marriage because rural voters don't give a shit about that anymore as they used to, even though Republicans will claim up and down they do. Take it from me, someone who lives in rural America, they don't. It's they've become a lot more libertarian to it. They prefer you vote against it, but they're not gonna burn down a city if, a gay marriage bill passed. Next up, Iowa. You got a lot of room to grow here. We're talking likely Republican, around the 5 to 6 point range. Iowa's mostly rural, and it's not maxed out for Republicans yet, so Iowa would be a battleground for those rural areas. However, again, a 5 point shift to the left, because we're being realistic here, probably puts Iowa in the 5 to 6 point column for Trump, still a Republican state. Missouri, that also goes likely around 8 to 9 points. Again, Missouri, Republicans are maxed out in rural Missouri, and it's just going to continue to slowly shift to the left as years go on. Arkansas, that should be safe. Louisiana. Mississippi will be on the brink of likely. It's like a 10 to 11 point win for Trump. Now, in Mississippi, you'd have to target rural blacks, as Democrats should be doing by now, and for some reason aren't. They're just taken up for granted. Here, they would most likely, absolutely, be targeting them and telling them they got to vote, making Mississippi trend to the left more so than most states. Alabama, that goes safe Republican. Georgia, you're probably looking at close to likely a 3 to 4 point victory for you in Georgia, especially in a lot of areas where there are a lot of rural areas keeping these districts red. But there's just, if you were to target these rural areas, then you might have a chance to flip these typical Republican districts to Democrat hands with moderate Republicans. Florida, I'm going to say likely a 5 to 6 point victory for Republicans in the state. You're absolutely targeting the panhandle 100% with a populist record. Now, I'm talking about Trump populist rather than Bernie populist. You got to be talking about protectionism. You got to be like, yo, low taxes. People love to hear that everywhere, no matter where you go. You can go to urban America and be like, hey, you like tax cuts? Go, yeah, I like tax cuts. So you need to be talking about tax cuts as well. And, social issues probably, depends on where you are, moderate. And if you're in somewhere that's like a very left-leaning rural area, which there are that still vote Republican, then you might be like, hey, gay rights and all that. South Carolina, this one's going to be competitive. A lot of rural area to just take from Republicans here. Probably an 8 to 9 point victory. North Carolina, you absolutely win North Carolina. Probably by tilt margin at the least if you target rural America, especially the Appalachia Mountains. Those have a lot of swing voters that are ancestrally Democrat that don't vote anymore because there's a perception that the party's gone far left, which they have in certain ways. But if you were to target those voters, get messaging done right, you could absolutely swing North Carolina back, as well as in southeastern North Carolina. Down here, very heavy black population down here that just chooses not to turn out, which black population or black turnouts in those areas are very low because Democrat messaging has failed in North Carolina ever since 2012. Otherwise, Obama and Hillary and Biden would have won the state of North Carolina, especially Biden in 2020. Tennessee and Kentucky, those go safe. Kentucky would be on the brink, however. It would be a lot more competitive than you would expect because a lot of swing voters do live in eastern Kentucky. For some reason, just look at Andy Barr's district and take a look at Rocky Adkins' gubernatorial campaign back in 2019. He was having a heavy focus on rural voters. He essentially won rural voters in the primary, and he most likely would have beaten Matt Bevin by 5 points or more if he was the nominee. Just saying, rural voters in Kentucky would be a pain in the ass to Republicans if you were to get them on your side. Virginia, that's safe. West Virginia, similar to Kentucky, a lot of West swing voters here could really make Republicans sweat here and be like, oh shit, we've been taking them for granted. Ohio, same deal here as in Iowa, probably a little bit more closer, so close to lean on the breaking point. Indiana, this one could become competitive as well. However, it's become so red that a 5-point shift to the left in rural America really wouldn't push it to likely. Illinois, that's safe. Wisconsin would go lean D because you're also targeting white working class voters, and up here in the Iron Range, which is very heavily rural, those two areas, a 5 point shift to the left makes Wisconsin at least D+3. Michigan goes likely. You're targeting the upper peninsula of Michigan, which for some reason nobody does anymore. That's a lot of voters that could swing the state heavily in your favor. Pennsylvania also goes likely. Michigan's like a 6 point win, and Pennsylvania's a 5 point win. You're targeting Western Pennsylvania here. And, and it's just, and so, and again, we're being realistic here. A 5 point shift is a big shift to the left in a lot of ways. You also got Harrisburg down here. I believe that's Harrisburg, Scott Perry's district. There's a lot of people down there you could absolutely win over in that district against Scott Perry, a right-wing nationalist, but also kind of left-wing on some social issues like same-sex marriage, which is amazing. Again, you go on and win the entirety of the Northeast safe by a 5 point shift to the left in, real votes. Minnesota's 2nd district would be on the brink of a flip. However, Republicans still probably win that by a couple points. Really depends on how much you get Jared Golden out there to campaign for you. He's very popular in that district. So right off the bat, if you get a 5 point shift to the left in rural America, Democrats would win 319 electoral votes. Republicans would win 219. So you have a 100 electoral vote lead over here. And essentially, if you were to do better with rural voters, you would region lock Republicans, which, like I said, where Democrats would be unstoppable. Now, taking a look at the Senate map, taking a look here, Washington, California, Hawaii, those two are probably all safe Democrat. Nevada stays in Democrat hands more than likely. Jackie Rosen most likely will be carried over by Biden, especially if you're doing better with rural voters. Sinema probably ends up winning by a likely margin. She probably wins a lean by the end of the day, considering if she's primaried out or, who she's running against. But if you keep Sinema on the ticket, then you probably have a likely D Arizona on your hands. However, if you primary her out, you're probably looking at lean R Arizona, even if you are targeting rural America. But I'm just going off the assumption that you're keeping Sinema in Arizona because as you are moderating on issues, you want to keep Sinema in your party. That's just what you would need to do if you're targeting rural America. Utah, Wyoming, those probably go to Republicans no matter what. Montana, Ton Tester probably narrowly wins in Montana. Especially, it really depends on who you run. If Republicans run Ryan Zink, you're probably looking at lean D Montana. If you run anyone else, it's probably tilt D. If you're running Greg Gianforte, you better say goodbye to that Senate seat. He's unstoppable right now. Very popular governor in Montana. You better hope he doesn't run, or you fucked in Montana, no matter, even if you're running to do 5% better in rural America. New Mexico, that's safe. North Dakota, Nebraska, Texas would narrowly go to Ted Cruz, because Ted Cruz will underperform more likely than not, so he'll sweat, and depending on who you run, if you run a good candidate, if you run a blue dog in Texas, like I'm talking Manchin blue dog, then you probably win Texas, especially if you're targeting rural America. Minnesota, that goes safe. Hawley probably is in a competitive race in Missouri if Democrats target rural Missouri. Tennessee, Mississippi is actually, yeah. Wicker isn't as unpopular as Cindy Hyde-Smith. If Cindy Hyde-Smith was the senator in 2024, you'd be looking at a competitive race. Rick Scott, or whoever the Republican is probably going to be in a competitive race in Florida. Rick Scott really doesn't have that much appeal to white working class Florida. He does in the suburbs, however, so that probably has Scott win by 3-4. Kane probably wins by a safe margin. Depending on who you run in West Virginia, if Manchin, it really depends on who Republicans run, but Mooney probably is going to be the nominee. Mooney probably wins by 8 or 9 points against Manchin, since Manchin will be targeting rural America, rural West Virginia a lot, and with National Democrats following suit, it'll probably be a lot more competitive than it typically would. In Ohio, probably going to narrowly go to Republicans. We don't know who the nominee is, and I really don't know who would run. Right now, I'm thinking Warren Davidson at the top of my head. So he'd probably beat Sherrod Brown, even if Brown was targeting rural voters in the state. Indiana, that probably stays safe. Tammy Baldwin probably ends up winning by a likely margin. Same thing with Debbie Stabenow, but Bob Casey Jr. ends up winning safe because again, you got Western Pennsylvania, Casey will do well there. You've got the Upper Peninsula, Stabenow does well in. He probably does get close to Whitmer numbers in these counties down here in southern Michigan. Baldwin probably gets close to her numbers in 2018, but put that in, but with trends, of course. And of course, you also got to add that 5% shift to the left in rural America. And of course, you got the entirety of New England going safe Democrat, with the exception of New Jersey because Bob Menendez, super unpopular, probably ends up winning by 7-8, which there's no saving him. There's like Republicans got to nominate a nut job if you want Menendez to win by safe margin. Now, taking a look at the House, the potentiality, realistically, in winning safe Republican seats and targeting rural seats, you got a total opportunity to pick up 35 seats. I'm not joking. 35 seats is roughly, now you're not going to win every single seat, of course. A 5-point shift to the left in rural America will not equate to every single one of these seats flipping, but it will sure as hell make Republicans sweat. You take a look at Dan Newhouse's district. He's only being saved by the rural areas and maybe even suburbs as well. But if you do well and do better in rural America, you'll do better in the suburbs. Ryan Zink's district, Montana's first. He's unpopular. He was in a competitive race in 2022. You do better in rural Montana, you most likely oust him, but he's probably going to retire in 2024 to run again for Senate. The bluest district in Utah, Utah's 3rd district, got Salt Lake City. You've got two counties on the brink of being a blue county, or one of them's already a blue county. The other one's on the brink of being one. You also got this county up here. You got a lot of room to grow in the 3rd district, which you probably flip it if you do better in rural voters. Again, we talk about Native American voters. We got Eli Crane's district here. Probably be tough since you're running against a Native American Republican who could appeal to those voters. Excuse me. But again, you would probably make Republicans sweat here. Adam Frisch, if you get someone like Frisch to run again against Boebert, you probably oust her. If you do 5 points better, you probably oust Boebert. Again, you got this seat, you got Texas 23rd here. Rural voters are saving Tony Gonzalez, as well as Hispanic voters. You got the Rio Grande Valley seat in Texas 15th. You could probably win here. You do better in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa in Oklahoma. You probably could make Kevin Hern and Stephanie Bisey's district competitive. You got the 3 districts in Iowa you lost in the last 4 years. Nunn's district, Meeks' district, and Henson's district. All 3 of these seats could potentially go your way, go to the Democrats' way if you do better in rural America. You got Finstad's district. A lot of people were expecting this seat to be a lot more competitive than it was. It would be especially competitive if you do better with rural voters. This district, absolutely, ancestral Democrats in all 3 of these districts could absolutely go your way if you just target rural voters, especially the Iron Range district with Pete Stabber. You could absolutely oust him. You do better with white working class rural areas, you probably end up defeating Derek Van Orden. You probably beat Brian Steele, however, he's a juggernaut in the district, so he's going to be a bit more competitive. Like I said, the Upper Peninsula, you do, like this one's a cash cow for both parties if they just need to realize it first. The bluest red district in the entirety of Louisiana, Julia Letlow, honestly, if Democrats decided they wanted to target rural voters, Letlow probably sweats the most. Probably the most unlikely, however. You have Neil Dunn's district. You do better with rural black voters, white working class voters. You probably either win the district or get super close. Marjorie Taylor Greene, I'm thinking this is a similar situation to Lauren Boebert. However, she's in a much redder district. Really depends on how you campaign in the district, I guess. You also have the 11th and 6th districts. Those are connected to the Atlanta suburbs, but also have plenty of rural areas to keep them red for now. Again, you probably end up winning these districts outright if you do 5 points better in rural America, as well as the 12th and 1st district. Those two have plenty of blue areas, plenty of suburban Democrat areas to eventually make these competitive. But again, if you start targeting rural voters, then you absolutely could end up winning these 2 seats. Again, Appalachia, America, we've already talked about that. That seat would absolutely go back to Democrat hands. You also have the black voters in the 7th and 9th district. Those two would go blue. Andy Barr's district, he severely underperforms expectations every single time. You could probably get him. Ancestral Democrat areas in northeast as well as eastern Ohio, you probably target these areas. You could make them competitive. The 14th district, you could probably win in 2024 if you do better with rural areas, especially as well as West Pennsylvania. You could probably oust Mike Kelly, maybe Scott Perry as well. You could probably oust Andy Harris. With you already have enough suburban votes here to, you know, potentially beat him in a blue way, but with rural voters now starting to come back to you, you probably beat him, as well as Virginia's 1st district, the East area I don't know the name of. There's a name for it, just don't know it. You probably make Whitman sweat. It's already a competitive Trump district, but he outperforms, so it really depends on how you campaign here. So at most, you have 35 rural Republican safe seats that would be competitive or you could flip in 2024 if Democrats decided to target rural voters. But that's enough of me yambling around. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is the Chaotic One saying, peace.